All right, welcome to the Great Valley Writing Project podcast, season one. We are now into episode two. My name is Brett Ashman. I'm the director of the Great Valley Writing Project with a bunch of fur on me from the dogs. And I am joined by my co-host and fellow leader of Great Valley Writing Project, Madi. Madi, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am the communications coordinator of the Great Valley Writing Project, and I've been a participant in all sorts of writing project programs and events since 2016. I am also a classroom teacher I was like, where do I teach? Ceres Unified, Ceres High School. I teach freshman and creative writing. And were you going to introduce yourself, or should I pass it on to Leandra?
If you, Leandra, why don't we go into, actually, let's do this real quick, maybe a little more formal, I guess. Our topic today is writing for self-care and how we can use writing for ourselves to work through some situations or some negative experience or even positive experiences, and then how we can help students who are going through traumatic experiences or negative experiences or positive experiences to use writing as a way to work through those emotions and work through those experiences. And when Madi and I were thinking about this, Madi pointed out a wonderful coworker and co-teacher that she has in Leandra. So Madi invited Leandra, and we're very thankful to have her here today to kind of discuss those things as well. So Leandra, can you give us a little background of who you are?
Yeah, so I teach at Ceres Unified as well. It's my 6th year now, and I teach freshmen and seniors right now. I've taught juniors in the past as well. But I went through the program for Great Valley Writing Project, I think in 2018. And then more recently, like the past year, I've gotten involved with NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. So I've become like a guest speaker, basically sharing my story with my own mental health struggles. So I like that I can kind of tie in like all these different things together with like writing and teaching and mental health. So thanks, guys.
No, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
So the first question we had, I'll ask, and I'll kind of ask in a roundabout way. But the first question is, for yourself personally, how have you internalized, or how do you use writing as a way to provide self-care for yourself? And the part of the reason I'm asking is, and this sounds bad as a director of the writing project, but I struggle sometimes with using writing as a way to process things, and when I do use it, it is always effective. But this may be coming from a place of being a former athlete. I would much rather go out on a run or go lift weights, and that helps me work through it. But in talking to you, you've talked about how your writing is especially important for you for self-care and for working through things. And so I'm interested in your own personal use of writing to take care of yourself, and how you approach that process.
Yeah, so I think I mean, technically I've been doing writing as a form of self-care before I even knew anything about self-care or what it was. It was just kind of something I picked up naturally with writing. It started like as a kid, I would just write about my day and like my new diary, and I was super excited about that. But then as I got older and probably started to go through more things and needing to process them, I think my diary entries kind of turned more into like self-reflection. And I think looking back now, I think writing helped me become just more self-aware, because for me, writing is not just an outlet or a way to process, but it's kind of like putting down on paper like my truest self, like things that I haven't spoken out loud, things that other people don't know, things that maybe I don't even know are in myself until I write it out. So for me, I can kind of use it as a way to not just have an outlet, but to track my progress over time. And so some ways that some methods I've used for writing for self-care, I think my first the first thing that I did was start a blog. That was back in like college, and that was more like a chance for me to get some of the things I was writing about more personally, to be able to share that with other people. And like most of the people who read it were just family and friends, but I got really good responses of like people relating to my writing, people like sharing similar things, or from other people that they know having similar experiences, and just like learning more in general about my writing. And even though it was like a small handful of people that would read it, that kind of let me see like there was more purpose in writing for self-care, like more than just for me. Like when you share your writing with other people, it can also help them too. So that way, and free writing. Do you want me to just go ahead and list like the different types of writing? Is that fine? So free writing is like, that's the one method that mental health services kind of use as like a form of processing. And so free writing could just be literally anything. Like you can sit there and write anything and just see what comes out. You can start writing like random words and then just see what starts to come to mind and write whatever comes to mind. I think that that's also maybe something that like younger students have done in their classroom, maybe not that often. I think that when I was younger, that was kind of something that we did just to get kids used to the idea of writing and to get students to just practice writing something. You know, it doesn't have to be connected with like a text, and getting them to see like that version of writing. But I feel like for people that struggle with writing for self-care, it could be a good one because there's not really any rules to it. Like it could just be whatever you want. You don't have to share it with anyone. It could be for 10 minutes. It could be for 2 minutes, like whatever it is. But I think that for me, the biggest thing is I set like my own rules with my writing. And I think that for other people, it can feel like it's an obligation. Like I have to do writing because it's good for me. Like I have to go to the gym because it's good for me. I have to do this because it's good for me. But for it to not seem like such a chore, I think that people probably need the freedom to like figure out like, what am I feeling right now? Is this a good time for me to write? Do I have anything to write about? Do I feel inspired? Am I upset? Like, am I mad at somebody? So I think using like, you know yourself best, and using your judgment of like when it's going to help you to write and when you want to do it, because forcing yourself to do it, I don't know if where like someone else or myself was just like forcing me to do it, I would have been like, okay, I'm so done with this. Like, I'm over it. I'm bored. And like, I don't want to do homework. Yeah. But, and again, like another thing that takes a couple of minutes is making lists. Personally, that's what I like, because it's not like to-do lists. I call them like already done lists, like a list of things I've already done. And it's so basic with like I think this is something that I picked up in therapy at some point, and it's so basic to just list the things down that you've accomplished that day. But I think that something as simple as that really doesn't take a lot of time, can kind of help pull you out of like this mindset where you feel like you have to be super productive all the time. Like you feel like you're never doing enough. You feel like sometimes you can't get caught up with everything that you need to do. And making a list of things you've already done that are like even forms of self-care. Like it doesn't have to be, sometimes it's something productive like grading 20 essays. Sometimes for me, it's like, I did the dishes today. I'm happy. I'm putting that down on my list. Like I took my dog for a 10-minute walk. Hey, I'm putting that down on my list because that felt really good. And it made me feel good that I'm keeping up with things that are good for me. So it kind of separates you from that like productivity and deadlines and all of that stuff, and feeling like you're not keeping up or you're not doing your work good enough. But seeing what you have accomplished and that those are valuable things to you can kind of help you figure out next steps. And it helps me feel pretty good about myself, honestly.
I love that idea so much, just because I do feel like you said that we get so caught up in like what I should, like, I still have this to do and I still have this to do. And my husband says all the time, like, you could work for 12 hours and then you're still like, I need to do all these. Like, it's never enough. So I really like that idea of listing things you have done down. And I think that also when you are having a bad day or you do feel not so good about yourself or what you've accomplished, you can look at those lists and remember, like, every little thing is helping. Like, everything is self-care. Like that 10-minute walk, like, maybe I don't feel good right now about what I've accomplished. I'm gonna take my dog for a walk. It felt so good last time. So it's kind of like a reminder, but also a reminder looking back, but also a reminder of that day as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add real quick that there's so much in there, Leandra. So thank you for that. That a couple of things that just kind of stuck out was the diary idea has kind of seemed like it triggered and has started things. And there's a young lady in one of my classes right now who wrote a piece about her diary and writing through that. And I think that's a really important component. And I wonder how that could be used more in the classroom. You also talked about something that reminded me of Donald Murray's quote, and I'm butchering it, but something about like, don't be afraid to start writing without knowing where you're going with it, and just discover where you're going along the way. And that always resonated with me. You also mentioned something about how good writing resonates, which is so important. Like we were talking about your blog and how you started realizing other people were like appreciating it or going through something similar. So I think that idea of like writing about divorce in California, if it resonates with someone who's going through a divorce in New York, that's good writing, right? Like that's the power of writing. And then I also appreciate the list. I titled them on my own notes, Giving Grace List. And so you're taking the time to say that you're doing something well. But I like what Maddie said, that it's actually, you could also look back at it and say, oh, you know what? I really like that I did that, or I like that walk, so I'm going to do that again. Maybe you forget about some of these things that you did. So thank you, Leandra.
Yeah. And I think too, that kind of remind me of just like how I feel after I make those lists. And what I see is that even though I'm feeling like I'm not doing enough, I haven't done enough, I have so much left that I still have to do, it makes me more aware that I've actually done more than like I've given myself credit for. And like I've done more than I've even realized. And so like listing it out really shows me like, okay, like I am keeping up pretty well considering all these things I have to do. Like I'm making more than a dent in it. So just going to keep going.
I just wanted to pull this out. This is my list that I have my running list too. And then I have, I was actually talking to a student today who's feeling a little stressed out. And I brought the same idea about lists. And these are my yellow pad of all the different lists for each different day and crossing those out. So I'm on board, Leandra, and I hope other people hear that if they're not doing it already and start thinking about lists. And I know Dr. Stephanie Patterson is a huge fan of lists as well. I have other things I'll say, but I don't guess I'll sidetracked. Maddie, anything else to add before the next question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question before you got too far away from blogs. I know now you're a big advocate and an important voice in kind of processing anxiety and, like you said, your own mental health kind of journey. I'm just curious, at the beginning when you started your blog, was it anonymous, or were you always upfront that it was you, Leandra, like writing these thoughts down, or was it kind of more of like, I'm going to put them out there, but I don't want anybody to know that it's me putting them out there?
Yeah. For me, I always identified myself, and I always meant to share it with like the people who knew me. So I could see like why someone might want to keep it anonymous. And I think that it could still be like just as effective, you know, if somebody chose not to share the identity. But for me, I think I was hoping more to use it as a way to connect to people who I already have some relationships with, or this is the other special guest. And like, I don't know, I guess it doesn't, I don't think it really matters if you choose like what is it, like an alias or whatever, or like a pen name to identify yourself. Like, again, like with setting your own rules for writing, like I think whatever works. I'm glad you brought back the blogging stuff, because now what I'm seeing, like when I first started my blog, that was more of a thing for people to blog on other websites, like, you know, WordPress and stuff, or Weebly. And it's really easy to start your own blog on those websites too. But now what I'm seeing is there's a shift. Hey, there's a shift from one second, let me get that cat out of here.
They can
There's a shift from like posting your blog on a website and just using social media as a blog, like in its own thing, like on Facebook or on Instagram. Like you can have your own personal blog be in your writing and in your posts, like on there. So I feel like that's kind of becoming more and more common for people to do.
Yeah. So you spoke of the blogging and free writing. Were there other forms of writing you were going to talk about, or would you like me to move us to the next question?
Yeah, there were two more that
Okay.
I've done. There are now self-care journals. Oh my God. Let's go outside, little
You know, I don't want a cat, but now I kind of do. Like if that's what cats do, I kind of like that.
He likes to climb and just hang out on the back of my chair. Like he could be like right here, like a pet parrot. Anyway, so self-care journals are becoming bigger now, like that, where you can buy them online on Amazon or even find them at stores and stuff, where they're just interactive journals that prompt you to write. And for anyone that maybe struggles to get started, like there's some that have a variety of ways to prompt you to write. So for some of them, you can respond to a prompt. For some of them, it's making a list. For some of it, it's like just writing individual words. So it's more of like strategic processing. And other than that method, and I've found really good ones for like $5 at Ross too. If you just kind of like look around, you might be surprised at like what's out there to keep you organized with it. Like if you're looking for something that's gonna keep you more like on track and organized, I personally would probably go with like an interactive self-care journal if that was what I wanted. The other one was just writing a letter. And I know that that one is used by a lot of individuals in therapy because it can really help with relationships or processing relationships, processing past trauma that involves other people. And usually what it is like you have the choice of you could either give it to the person who you were writing to, or it could just be more of a personal release. Maybe you can keep it and read it over when certain things come up to like remind you of that release. Or you could just burn it in an act of symbolism of letting go of something or someone. That's another way too. So yeah.
I love all the different ideas that you brought. It's not just here's a blank paper, right? But the blogging, the free writing, the letters, the self-care prompts. Brett, did you have anything to add before I transition?
Maddie, I have a ton to add, but I know we're trying to give little shorter versions of the podcast, so I'll keep it to myself. But I appreciate all of those, Leandra.
So my question for you, with writing being such an integral part of your life and all these different kinds of writing, and I feel like I kind of know the answer to this because we work together, but for those who are not fortunate enough to have you as a PLC partner, what types of writing do you teach or use in the classroom with your students? Do you see an overlap between the writings you've seen as beneficial and kind of what you bring to your students in your classroom?
Yeah, so I feel like, and I could talk about challenges too with bringing writing into the classroom later if we want to, but I feel like the writing that I've done in the classroom has been more tied to like the push that we see now in education with like social emotional learning. And so with the push for social emotional learning, a lot of that has to do with like being self-aware, being socially aware, reflecting. And so I think that those things connect really well to writing for self-care, because part of one of the benefits of self-care writing is becoming more self-aware and understanding like your stream of consciousness a lot better than you would have if you hadn't. So what I tend to try to do is connect it to anything that's like a social emotional skill that I'm trying to teach students. So it could be like responding to examples of like interactions between students, like how would this make you feel in this situation? How would you respond? How do you think your words might affect somebody else? So getting them thinking about those things through writing. For me in my class, I noticed some growth in that area because with a lot of the freshman students that like we see this year, having spent like a year online and distance learning, the social emotional skills are what they've been lacking the most. So I kind of feel like it nailed in a couple of things like, hey, you don't only have to worry about, like the curriculum, but this stuff's important too.
And before we move on from this question, I see Brett about to say something. I do just want to say that I know that your students are so fortunate to have you, and I've seen the amazing things that you do with them in your classroom, just being down the hall from you. So I just want you to know that your hard work is very much seen and recognized, and your students are very, very lucky to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I'll echo that. I'm going to be the bad guy for a second, because I think this is really interesting, and it's something that I'm not asking this because I know the answer to it. It's something I'm wrestling with right now, and I'll give you a few examples. I'll try to make them brief. You brought up social emotional learning, and one of my concerns as someone who teaches future educators is I 100% agree with the idea of social emotional learning, like raising human beings who are self-aware. I notice a lot of times students who are successful in college and being self-aware and aware of who they are as a person and be able to step out and be like, and socially aware of the circumstance, are the ones typically that are successful. And you can see the ones who are struggling typically aren't self-aware and don't understand those things. So I think there's a lot of value to it. At the same time, I also am concerned about I guess you can call it overreach. And is it the teacher's responsibility to bring in and to help the social emotional part of things, or is that the parents' responsibility? And where is that like line, and where is that drawn? I was talking to a friend this last week about something like this, and what they said was they're a parent of a child, and they said, I don't need you to give my child a hug. I'll give them the hug. I need you to teach multiplication and that and writing and stuff. And so that resonates with me. What you're saying also resonates with me. And on top of that, I just had a student today who reached out and said, can we meet? Can we talk? Because I'm going through some stuff. And at the end of that conversation, the student told me, like, I want you to know as a professor, what you're doing isn't just earning you a paycheck. You're actually impacting lives. You're impacting my life positively. And it had nothing, I wasn't teaching that student writing or anything about liberal studies. We're talking about life. And so there's this weird blurred line between teaching content knowledge and curriculum, and then also modeling, I guess would be my answer to it, but modeling humanity and being a good human being. So again, I lean recently more towards we need to teach content knowledge and probably model these things. But I also know that social emotional learning is a huge thing right now. So just so I'm transparent where I'm coming from, doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm interested in your thoughts on what I just said or brought up.
No, yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, because I've kind of seen like the rapid increase in the social emotional stuff in the classroom, like the past couple years, and then of course projected like even more into the present with the pandemic and stuff and kids being at home. So like, yeah, I feel like it's kind of something where like, in college when you're learning how to teach and what you're going to teach, it's like that was never really something I would have thought like, oh, I'm teaching, kids this skill as well, like to be self-aware and socially aware. So teaching that to kids already is kind of new to me, and I see how they come together with like a student's learning, a student's behavior, like all of that stuff is tied together, because there are things that prevent students from learning that have to do with social emotional awareness. And so I can see why maybe now it's partially become the teacher's responsibility to teach students that stuff, or school-wide, or however it is for different districts. But I can definitely also see that like wouldn't that be the parent's responsibility to
Right.
teach the kid those skills? And then of course, we see students that simply just don't have certain types of support at home, where they're not going to get those skills anywhere but their teachers. And so I definitely see like that push and that pull, where it's like, where's the line? Where do we draw the line between like, we're supposed to teach this much curriculum and focus this much on social emotional learning? And that's what teachers already focusing on so much, like with the whole student behaviorally, socially, emotionally, academically, and considering all these different factors, to the point where I think recently, like this year, teachers are kind of like what else can I do possibly to support these students? Like I'm doing all these different things, hitting all these different areas, but at what point do we hold the student responsible, the parents responsible, districts responsible, or whatever it is? So I don't know if I really have like a clear answer about that, but I just wanted to say, like, I hear everything you're saying, and like I hope I can provide a little bit more insight of like what I see in the classroom with that stuff too.
Yeah, and Leandra, I appreciate you going down this tributary with me, because it is something that has been on my mind. I think it's on a lot of teachers' minds and parents' minds.
Yeah.
And you bring on another good point that I failed to mention, which is the parental responsibility of this, and how all these other factors play into it, which is if there's not two parents at home, if both parents are working and they're doing the best they can, or maybe working two jobs or whatever the case, and they're not home until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and that child is spending most of the day with you, then it's nice to say that parents have a responsibility of raising their children to be kind and compassionate human beings. But if they're not around them because rent is now $3,000 a month or whatever, and they have to make ends meet, then that's nice to say for me, but in reality, how is that possible, right? So there's that part of it too that comes into it that makes it more complex. And I think it's a difficult thing to try to figure out. And so I don't know if this is right or not, but I try to push my emerging educators that I'm in contact with to really create that connection with parents, so that you and that parent are working together to figure out what's best for this child. What do they need? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to stay away from? And I hope that more educators and more parents can come together and make that collaboration work. I know it's not going to be 100%, but I think making that emphasis is worthwhile. And again, I apologize for going down. We weren't planning on going down this path, but Madi or Leandra, did you want to add anything to that before we get back on track?
Very good.
Okay. Madi, was it your turn or it's my turn? Or did you have anything else on Madi's question, Leandra?
No, I think that was it.
Okay. So the third question we had for you is, how are you in the classroom using writing to help your students cope with the current situation? And when I say current situation, I'm mainly thinking about the pandemic and being away from their classmates for a long time, being out of that social context for a long time, getting back into the classroom, having to wear a mask, all of those things. How have you found writing useful to help students and yourself kind of navigate those waters?
Yeah, so I feel like mostly this year and a little bit last year, I've kind of been more getting my feet wet with trying some of those things. And I think like for our district, at least, they're pushing more of like the emotional check-ins, like checking on students so that they can tell us how we are feeling. And usually it could be done like in a discussion, or it could be on a Google form. You can make it, more personal and private that way. So that was kind of where I started, was checking in on students that way when I couldn't see them in person, and then going from there with figuring out like, oh, they said they feel this way because this happened to them. Maybe that's why they are behind on like 10 different assignments. What could I do to support the kid? Maybe I can refer them to their learning director. So it kind of helps me with that to have a starting point. But as far as the actual like writing, I think what I've noticed helps the most is students setting goals for themselves and writing about why those goals are important to them, but also going back after a week or 2 weeks has passed, and writing a reflection on whether they met those goals. If they didn't, what got in the way? Do they need to revise their goal and make it more realistic for them? Or do they feel like, I got this now, I think I want to set a new goal for myself? So that's what I've been trying out more this year. And I do feel like it's holding kids accountable. Like a lot of them were setting goals for like, okay, I'm going to try to have a good start to my Monday morning by going to bed earlier. I'm going to put my phone away the last hour before bed, or I'm going to wake up just 15 minutes earlier. I'm going to choose my outfit the day before, pack my backpack so that I can not be late to school, like those kinds of things. And it just kind of helps you as a teacher learn more about them too.
Yeah, I'm smiling because you and I are doing similar things, and we didn't even talk about it before. But I have, in my 2009, I asked all my students before the semester to write goals for this class. Like, what are your goals? And then I just did a check-in with them to go revisit their goals and not just say these things to say them, but like, where are you with those? And I really appreciate what you said about accountability. It reminds me of student agency and accountability, and which takes me back to something you said at the beginning, which is like the emotional check-ins and stuff. And I'm interested. I don't know how candid we can be on this, but I'm interested in both you and Maddie, your thoughts about the emotional check-ins, and how much do you think it's the focus on emotion is helping? How much do you think is like providing, like hurting, in the sense that it's providing excuses to like not do stuff and not be held accountable? And I don't mean to take this away from the positives of social emotional learning and positives of writing to cope, but I think it's an important other side of the discussion, and that we have to be aware of. Is it good or bad, or are we helping or hurting students? And so I'm just interested in your guys' experience and where you see that.
You want to jump in?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you asked this because I'm smiling under my mask too. It's funny you asked this because we have SEL goals in our district, and ours was those check-in questions. That's the goal that we set as a PLC. And we had to do a reflection on those today. And I will admit mine was slightly negative because I was like, a lot of kids are like, why do I have to do this? Like, this has nothing to do with English. Like, why do I have to tell you how I feel? But, and I want to go back and add this on my reflection, as Leandra was talking, the students who need somebody to hear them, those are the ones who need it. So there might be 25 kids who don't want to do it, who don't take it seriously, but the smiles and the like eyes brighten when a student realizes you read what they said and you talk to them about it the next day. Like a student wrote, it was which weather best matches. And he said, one was a dog with wind in his hair. And he's like, that one really resonates with me because my dog died on Sunday. And it's like, I never would have known that about the student, that's what they were going through. But then you can check in like, hey, are you doing okay? So while many or most of them don't necessarily need it, the ones who do, it's so powerful for. So I'll keep doing it just because those students need that.
Yeah. And something that I do too is I don't really make it like, I usually make it to where they do need to like pick something that shows what they're feeling. But the part about their explanation, like I say, if you don't want to share why, or you don't want to talk about it, or don't want me to know, just put NA. And either way, no one else is gonna see it but me. But you could just put NA if you don't want to talk about it. So like I get plenty of NA. But then I get like those that do actually like care to tell me like, oh, I have this going on, good or bad, and that kind of give me a little bit more. So I, like you said, I think it helps just provide the space for those that do want to use it.
And during distance learning, like you said, we started doing this back when we were on Zoom. It was Zoom check-ins and just a way to get students participating and in the chat. And students told me at the end of the semester, you're the only teacher who asked us how we're doing. Like for months, like during this last semester, you're the only teacher who actually asked, how are you? And that alone is enough for me. Like, is it too soft? I don't know. But if nobody asked them, like, sorry, we were talking about being soft before you got here, Leandra. But is it overstepping or is it whatever? But when nobody asks them how they're doing, I'm willing to put a little more into that because somebody needs to ask them how they're doing. Just broke my heart.
Yeah. I was surprised too at the end of that year, last year, that I got some thank yous of like, thank you for doing these, thank you for checking on us, thank you for asking us, you know, so that was really cool to see.
Yeah, and just so not everybody, you know, the hundreds of thousands who are watching this think I'm a jerk. I do like my surveys, my student evals at the end of the semester are always like, you're the one who actually like cared about what's going on. So I believe wholeheartedly in this, but these last few years have made me really like start reflecting on what is my role and how can I make sure I'm never going to give up caring about my students. Like it's natural in me to do that. But how do I make sure that I care about my students while I'm teaching them how to write effectively? And so I think sometimes what happens is we do one or the other. It's like, well, my job is to teach them how to write effectively. I don't care about all the other filling stuff. And then that goes out the window. And then the other person is like, no, I have to spend 50 minutes asking everybody how they're doing, making sure it's okay. And it's like, well, the student, that's good that they feel good, but they don't know how to use a semicolon and they don't know how to use APA, right? And that's not caring about your students either. And so I think it's really important for teachers to reflect on what they're doing and critically assess themselves and say, what am I actually doing? Am I too far this way? Am I too far this way? And then always kind of like balancing and navigating that area. So, okay, Maddie, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I was going to merge my last two questions together. So if you wanted to do your last question, and then I'll close this up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we're going to share a picture with Leandra, and Leandra's being a sport. I didn't share it with her beforehand. So let me share my screen and all.
I'm not even sure if I know what the picture is going to be.
Oh, so this is the picture. You can see that. And I'm interested, Leandra, in what you think about this photo.
Oh, I like that. I've seen something kind of similar. Yeah, so like I would interpret that. I see that and I feel like it resonates with me and like why I write, because I see like just full emotions, red, like angry, upset, and overwhelmed. It's like he looks completely covered in red, and then it starts to fade away as they write, and then it looks like their expression has changed. So something has changed from the point where they started to where they ended. There's a pretty common one floating around online, but it's more referring to like talking to someone for help, where like they're sitting across from each other and there's like a yarn in their mind and someone's helping unwind it for them as they're talking. So I feel like those two both resonate with me.
Yeah, I think the one you just talked about, Leandra, is it sounds familiar, but it also reminds me of the work of like a one-to-one writing conference and how students working through an essay or a writing, and you can see it, or maybe you don't see it as a teacher, but talking to them and that back and forth, all of a sudden that unravels and you can finally get to where you want to get. I've had students, this one student I remember, it's so funny in my office, I was talking and she goes, shut up. And like she like figured it out and like she understood because she had that moment and she needed to like think without me talking. And so those writing conferences, I think, relate to that as well. So thank you for being.
You just made me have like this epiphany moment where sometimes I'll ask my husband a question or ask somebody a question, and as I'm asking, I like talk through it, and then by the time I get to the end of my question, I'm like, never mind, I don't have a question anymore. But I've never done that in writing. Like I never think about like writing through my question and trying to get to an answer. I always go to ask somebody. So I think I'm going to try writing next time I have a question and see if I can come up with my answer. Like you said at the beginning, sometimes you figure out what you're thinking. One of my favorite quotes is, I write because I don't know what I think until I read what I say. So I think that all kind of ties together in that.
So real quick, and then for your follow-up or your final question, that Virginia, my dissertation chair, we're revising one of my chapters, and all of a sudden she always questioned me in these line of questions, but there's one line of questions about me being a transfer student, working with transfer students, and my dad as someone that I was trying to like make proud. And as she was like, we're working on the writing, but she's asking me these questions, and all of a sudden, like, we're sitting right here at the desk, like, and we're on Zoom, and I got goosebumps, and I started like tearing up because what she did was like this therapist kind of, and she did it intentionally, where she helped me realize that the reason I'm so passionate about these transfer students and the work that I'm doing is because I am that transfer student that I'm writing about. And like, it was just, you talk about the epiphany, it was just like, holy crap, this person's really smart, and it pisses me off that they figured all that out, and now I'm at this emotional state. So there's a lot of power in the work that we're doing when we understand it really well. Maddie, go for it.
All right, I'm gonna close us. So our final question of each of these interviews is going to be, and then I'm gonna add to it. So the final question is always going to be, what advice would you have for an emerging educator? So for the vein of this questioning, what advice would you have for an emerging educator who feels like writing is another thing? I don't have any time to write. I have all these assignments. Like, you want me to do one more thing? And kind of a parallel question, what advice would you have for somebody who has the page and they're just kind of frozen? I don't know what to put down. I don't know how to write. Like, I have a journal, but what do I do with it? So kind of twofold. What do you do when you want to write, but you don't know what to write? And what do you do when you feel like it's something else to do?
Yeah. So I'll address the one about like having it be, it sounds like almost like a chore. Like, I have all of these things to do. Why am I going to sit there and add one more to my list? And maybe my advice is kind of similar for both of these examples, but I would try starting with something that just seems the shortest to try it out, and maybe exploring like different options, because maybe some of those options are going to feel like chores for you as an individual, but maybe you'll find a certain form, like maybe the list thing will work for you. Maybe the letter is something that you'll like do one time and then like not do it until maybe something happens years later and you do it again. But the other part of it is going back to like what I said about having this freedom to your writing and setting your own rules for writing, and like figuring out if, you know, like, I'm just not feeling it today. I don't have anything to write about. Like, I'm fine. I don't really feel like I need to write today, and letting you use your best judgment about yourself versus like forcing yourself to sit there and write something every day because you think that that consistency is going to help you. I think just writing it all, whether it's consistent or not, can definitely help.
Thank you, Leandra. Maddie, am I correct that you have class in like 2 minutes? Is that right? Or
I have class at 6, but we're
okay,
we're good.
you're fine. So I wanted to mention one thing that I heard a lot from you, Leandra, and I already said it, but a lot of what you're saying, and I appreciate, is the accountability and the agency, the self-agency. And again, it came out just now in what you just said in your answer about you not doing the writing because you're supposed to do it or someone else is doing it and you look up to that person and this is a habit I need to get into, but doing it because you know what you need and you're going to utilize what you need, and you're going to do that. You have the agency, you're going to do that. And I think that's something that I hope is emphasized more in education, and especially for young people, to realize their agency. So I appreciate that, those answers in that conversation coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Maddie, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to say that when Brett and I were kind of brainstorming what we wanted the topic to be for tonight, and we landed on self-care, and I was like, I think Leandra has a lot to say about this. I think you could talk for hours and hours more, and you have such great insights. And I don't want to say experience, it is experience, but that feels more like work. Like, you just have this passion about the writing and about the self-care. And like you said before, you kind of brought all your worlds together between teaching and Great Valley Writing Project and your blogs and everything. So it definitely shines through between all the different worlds. And I feel that genuine care and passion. And I mean, I know you as a human being and an educator, but I really appreciate you coming here and sharing. I think that a lot of people can hear what you're saying and might and will, I should say will, not might, but have that courage to pick up that pen and just try one of these strategies, even if they've been paralyzed with fear or thought it was like a chore before. So I think, Brett, we definitely made the right choice in asking Leandra to be here. We so appreciate you taking the time to come tonight with us.
Thanks. Yeah, I was like super excited when you told me about it. I was like, what, a podcast and it's on self-care? That's right up my alley. And I'm like typing away on my notes like, oh, I got this I can say, this I can say. So yeah, it was really fun. Thank you guys for having me on here.
Thank you very much, Leandra. I'm going to say the awkward, we're going to stick around, but goodbye, Maddie. Goodbye, Leandra. Thank you very much.
Bye.